10 years ago, I stood on this very bima on Yom Kippur and delivered a sermon about making Jewish choices. Remember how I was here 10 years ago? And I wasn't, and I came back, right? I later learned that on that same day, Yom Kippur in 2015, a great American philosopher died. Through his observations and pithy statements, this philosopher changed the way we understand the world. He gave us a language to help us as we struggle with the complexities of our lives. This great American philosopher also had quite a bit of experience playing Major League Baseball. He was one of the most clutch hitters of all time, a stalwart of the New York Yankees dynasty of the late 40s through 60s, and a cornerstone of 10 World Series victories in 15 years. This philosopher of whom I speak, who died 10 years ago on Yom Kippur, was, of course, Yogi Berra. Today, Yogi Berra is known for his maxims, perhaps even more so than his Hall of Fame career. Here are some of his yogiisms. A nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. If you come to a fork in the road, take it. It's deja vu all over again. Never answer an anonymous letter. You can observe a lot by watching. The future ain't what it used to be. If you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. It gets late early out here. Baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. Why buy good luggage? You only use it when you travel. Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. You should always go to other people's funerals, otherwise they won't come to yours. Now, honestly, I'm not totally accurate in attributing all these yogiisms to Yogi Berra because even he himself allegedly said, I never said all those things I said. These statements might seem like silly, simple sayings, aphorisms that are often factually impossible. However, in truth, yogiisms can be quite profound. When we study and think deeply about them, we come to the conclusion that significant truths are being communicated. In the Passover Seder, we read about the four children, the Chacham, the wise, Rasha, wicked, Tam, simple, and She'eno Yodea Lishol, the one who doesn't know how to ask. We might say that Yogi Berra is the Tam, the simple, but not in the sense of dim-witted. Rather, this simplicity consists of elegance, depth, and straightforwardness. Using simple language, Berra simply stated multiple truths. Pitcher Nolan Ryan once said, quote, if Yogi had gone to college, they would have made him talk clearer, but not better, end quote. For all the intellectual achievement of a university education, Berra's succinct and simple statements often offer brighter insights with more depth than the philosophers at today's institutions of higher learning. One of the most striking things about yogiisms is that they capture something that seems contradictory, placing two opposite ideas in conversation and allowing us to ponder the complexity. Take, for example, the yogiism. If people don't want to come out to the ballpark, nobody's going to stop them. On one level, it highlights the simple truth that fan attendance is ultimately determined by the public's desire to attend, something beyond the control of the team or anyone else. On a deeper level, it also speaks to a greater truth about free will and the limitations of external forces. Yogiisms can also express a seeming redundancy, but after thoughtful consideration, contain an important reality. For instance, the expression, we made too many wrong mistakes. An apt saying to consider on Yom Kippur. This might seem redundant, but actually tells us that there are different kinds of mistakes. There are mistakes that we can learn from in order to better ourselves, and there are others that are careless, which serve no greater purpose. It might be okay or even necessary to make the right mistake, but the wrong mistake will do nothing to help us grow and evolve. Yogiisms reflect the philosophical school called dialectics, which refers to the interaction or interplay of opposing ideas or situations. It is about understanding that contradictory things can exist simultaneously and influence each other. This was not only Yogi Berra's approach to the world, it's also Judaism's approach to the world. Jewish tradition is based on methods of communication and of argumentation which ask complex questions and is satisfied with multiple or even contradictory answers. We are okay responding to a difficult question or situation with the response, "It's complicated." This can be traced back to our understanding of God's creation of the world. In the story of creation, God declared each day's work good. And after creating humanity on the sixth day, God declared that work very good. God then rested and made the seventh day holy. All of the work was called good, and yet we know there is so much pain and imperfection in the world. The Torah makes this clear to us in the story that follows creation. The lesson of the story of the Garden of Eden is not that we were perfect and messed up that perfection, but that we were created with the ability to choose, and sometimes we'll make poor choices. It is built into the very nature of the world that we are imperfect and will struggle to get by, not that we always do the right thing and live in a perfect garden that provides for all of our needs. Our bodies are not perfect, and neither are our moral selves. In the midst of this natural state of imperfection, we are still called to live a life of goodness and purpose. This is captured in one of Yogi Berra's most profound statements. If the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. Because this is a world of brokenness, God charges us with the responsibility of moral greatness, to uplift those who have fallen, to complete that which is unfinished, to sanctify that which is mundane, to be partners with God in the unfolding process of creation. If the world were perfect, the expectation to live up to the highest of human virtues would not be necessary. Ours is a world of brokenness, of darkness and pain, as well as goodness and joy. We cannot choose one and deny the other. When we come to that fork in the road, we must take it. This yogiism, if the world were perfect, it wouldn't be, is best exemplified by a baseball game, which will be forever known as the imperfect game. Now, a perfect game occurs when a pitcher retires every batter that he faces, without allowing anyone to reach base in any way. This means there can be no hits, no walks, no hit batsmen, no uncaught third strikes, no catcher's interference, no fielder's obstruction, and no fielding errors. Over the 154 years of Major League Baseball history and over 230,000 games played, there have only been 24 official perfect games by that definition. Now, instead of talking about those masterpieces of pitching excellence, let us turn to June 2nd, 2010, at Comerica Park, where the Cleveland Indians were visiting the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers' pitcher that day was Armando Galarraga. He was a good pitcher, but not a particularly dominant one. Up to this point in his career, he had never even thrown a complete game. And yet, on that Wednesday afternoon in Detroit, he and the Tigers found themselves in the ninth inning with 2 outs, and Galarraga had retired 26 straight batters, 1 out away from making history. Indians shortstop Jason Donald came to the plate. Galarraga threw the pitch, and Donald hit a ground ball between first and second base. Miguel Cabrera, the Tigers' first baseman, moved to his right to field the ball as Galarraga ran to cover first base. Cabrera threw the ball to Galarraga, who stepped on the bag. Donald reached the base a half step later. Galarraga's face was joyful. Cabrera threw up his arms in the air in victory. Donald slapped his hands together, shaking his head in disappointment. Galarraga had just pitched a perfect game. But first base umpire Jim Joyce shot his arms out, crossing them across his chest, and yelled, "Safe!" Everyone was shocked. Joyce had blown an easy call, and a perfect game had been ruined. The aftermath of this clearly missed call can teach us more about life than if Joyce had made the correct call, which would have cemented Galarraga in baseball immortality. We can imagine the anger that Galarraga might have felt and shown as his perfect game was wrongly taken from him. But that's not how he responded. While the fans in Detroit erupted in boos and yelled things that I cannot say from the bima on Yom Kippur, and Tigers manager Jim Leland stormed out of the dugout to give Joyce a piece of his mind, Galarraga just smiled, shook his head, and accepted his fate. He shrugged it off and got the next out to win the game. After the game, Joyce watched the replay. He saw that he had made a mistake. He went straight to the clubhouse where he personally apologized to Galarraga. After Joyce apologized, Galarraga said, quote, "You don't see an umpire after the game come out and say, 'Hey, I'm sorry. He felt really bad,' end quote." Later, Joyce told the press, quote, "I just cost the kid a perfect game," end quote. Many people within Major League Baseball spoke out in support of Joyce, offering their sympathies and noting his exceptional reputation. New York Yankees pitcher Mariano Rivera said, quote, "It happened to the best umpire we have in our game, the best, and a perfect gentleman. It's a shame for both of them, for the pitcher and for the umpire, but I'm telling you, he is the best baseball has and a great guy," end quote. Don Larson, who threw the only perfect game in World Series history in 1956, and whose catcher for that game just happened to be the great philosopher that we're learning from today, said, in reflecting on the missed call, quote, "I feel sorry for the umpire, and I just feel real badly for the kid. He's probably wondering right now whose side God is on," end quote. I think God, as it were, was proud of both of them, not for the pitching prowess and all the other accurate calls, but for how they handled themselves after the one missed call, showing all of us the moral greatness we should all exhibit in moments of wrongdoing, atonement, and forgiveness. The next day, when the Tigers and Indians played again, Galarraga was the Tigers' representative to bring the starting lineup card to the umpire. That ump was Jim Joyce, who had been offered the day off, but chose to work instead. Galarraga got a standing ovation, and fans came to the ballpark with signs that said, "We all know it was perfect, and congratulations on your 28-out perfect game." Galarraga and Joyce acted with respect, compassion, and dignity. Their actions especially stand out in a culture where people who perceive themselves to be victims of an injustice scream, cry, and bitterly yell invectives at one another or into the social media echo chamber. Joyce became a model of teshuvah, admitting his mistake and genuinely asking forgiveness from the person he wronged. Galarraga became a model of grace and forgiveness, not dwelling on the wrongdoing or holding a grudge. This imperfect game served as a vehicle for teaching us about attaining moral greatness. The umpire's incorrect call allowed for the fulfillment of God's declaration that the creation of humanity was, in fact, very good. The actions of Galarraga and Joyce can be contrasted with another game with a similar outcome. On September 2nd, 1972, at Wrigley Field, Chicago Cubs pitcher Milt Pappas also came close to a perfect game. Facing the San Diego Padres, Pappas took his perfect game into the ninth inning. With 2 outs and 1 batter away from his own chance to be inscribed in the history books, Pappas worked the count to 3 balls and 2 strikes against Padres pinch hitter Larry Stahl. Pappas fired the next pitch, and umpire Bruce Fremming called a ball. Stahl took first base with a walk, ending Pappas's bid for a perfect game. In anger, Pappas yelled at Fremming, saying something to the effect of, "You could have gone down in history as someone who umped a perfect game." Decades later, Pappas was still bitter about what happened. In 2007, he told ESPN, quote, "I still to this day, don't understand what Bruce Fleming was going through in his mind at that time. Why didn't he throw up that right hand like the umpire did in the perfect game with Don Larson? It's a home game at Wrigley Field. I'm pitching for the Chicago Cubs. The score is 8-0 in favor of the Cubs. What does he have to lose by not calling the last pitch a strike to call a perfect game? End quote. To answer Papa's question, if Fleming called that pitch a strike, he would lose his integrity. Fleming has always maintained that that pitch was a ball, and in my humble opinion, I think he's right. You can find the video clip of that at-bat on the internet and watch it for yourself. I watched it several times. I think it's a ball. It was outside the strike zone, I'm sorry. Papa's reaction to Fleming's correct call that did not go his way makes the moral greatness of Galarraga's reaction to Joyce's incorrect call that much more apparent. While we see Pappas as bitter, we see heroic goodness in Galarraga and his relationship with the repentant Joyce. Even before Joyce demonstrated teshuvah, Galarraga illustrated his own moral greatness by carrying on with the game after the missed call. He maintained his composure and got the next out. His actions showed us that he was not owed a perfect game, nor did he expect an apology. Galarraga was satisfied with being very good instead of perfect. And we can probably infer that he would not have held a grudge if he did not receive an apology. Galarraga and Joyce are both exemplars for us. In Joyce's case, we should admit when we have made a mistake and confront those whom we have wronged with contrition. In Galarraga's case, we should be contented with less than perfect and do our best to carry on, even if we do not get an apology. Our lack of perfection is an invitation to come together and strive for goodness. On Yom Kippur, this is literally the case. At the beginning of this day, even before we recited Kol Nidre, the liturgy in our Machzor declares, by the authority of the court on high and by the authority of the court below, with divine consent and with the consent of this congregation, we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. While this statement permits us to pray with those who are not perfect, the rhetorical force of this pronouncement is much stronger than that. We are required to pray with the imperfect, and of course, we are all imperfect. In his book about the High Holy Day season, This is Real and You Are Totally Unprepared, Rabbi Alan Liu wrote, since each of us is imperfect by nature, it is only in community that we begin to find a sense of wholeness, a sense of completion. So not only is it permissible, not only is it required for us to pray with the imperfect ones, we have a desperate need to do so. And praying with them, we begin to find the answer to our own imperfection, end quote. It is in our coming together with our community that we can achieve the moral greatness and very goodness that God declares about humanity after the sixth day of creation. We each have things to offer others, and others can offer each of us what we lack. This mutuality is one of the foundations for how we strive for goodness and greatness. Our strengths are in our imperfections. Our world is broken and full of challenges, but these are the exact moments when tradition demands that we summon our inner courage to bring hope, greatness, and holiness to our imperfect world. There is much to do, much to fix, and much to heal, and much to sanctify. As umpire Jim Joyce demonstrated, this lack of perfection in humanity and in the world is what makes it possible for more good to come into the world. Imperfection allows for goodness that could not exist in a perfect world. Like Joyce, we must have the courage to acknowledge our imperfections and mistakes so that we can strive to be the very good humans that God calls us to be, truly becoming God's partners in creation. Normally, I would conclude a sermon on Yom Kippur with the standard holiday greeting of Gamar Chatima Tova, which literally means a good final seal. It is a wish based on the idea that if we do the inner work that is expected of us on Yom Kippur, we will be sealed for good in the book of life in the year ahead. However, Jewish tradition tells us that the gates of repentance are never closed, that there's always a chance to change our life for the better. A rabbinic teaching tells us that we should repent one day before death, with the implication being that since we don't know the day we will die, we repent every day. Taking all this into account, I'm not going to end with Gemar Chatima Tova today. Instead, as we accept our imperfections and endeavor together to achieve moral greatness, I will cite one final yogiism, famous words from the great philosopher and Hall of Fame catcher, and an appropriate message for this day of atonement and return. It ain't over till it's over.